Okay, I'm coming back. This is part two. I was running out of video in the last time in the last quick video, but I had left off and I was talking about the incompetence and the malfeasance that was going on at the police academy. Those actions still have effects today. You know, in the quality of police work that's done in the county. You know, and you know, it should have been eye-opening for the county residents. Recently, I got a court case ruling, and this is out of Vermont. This is the Vermont State Supreme Court. I understand, you know, of course, Vermont has no binding on Maryland or so forth, but I like to use other court cases because, just in a logical sense, right? Constitutional rights are just as important in Vermont as they are in Maryland. Constitutional rights are just as important in Arizona as they are in Maryland. You know, First Amendment rights are just as important. You know, Second Amendment rights, Third Amendment rights, Fourth Amendment. So the Constitution is just as important everywhere. So basically what was going on in Vermont was you had police officers on duty in the police station viewing pornography on their police computers, and they were downloading these images. And basically there was a big internal investigation launched. The police department wanted to go and be secret about it. They didn't want to release any of the documents to the local city newspaper up there. And so the city newspaper sued. It won. The judges in the trial court said, "Hey, you have to turn over all these documents. You can't redact these officers' names. All this is for the public information." And in the opinion, the lawyer for the city said it would cause great embarrassment and shame for the officers involved. And the court specifically stated, embarrassment and shame when weighed against the public interest to exercise oversight and accountability trumps a police officer's embarrassment and shame. This is what the judges have to say. This is what they interpret the public record statute to mean, at least in the state of Vermont. You know, so wouldn't those same principles, constitutional principles, apply to Maryland? The need to know, the need to hold police officers accountable, the need to seek transparency. Let me give you an example. In one of my earlier videos, I spoke about the two police officers from Prince George's County Police that were down in Chowers County. They kidnapped a young man, they beat him up, they left him in a field. Basically, that went to court. These guys were pleading guilty. They got sentenced to jail time. They were sentenced, convicted. But where's the Prince George's County Police Department? Do they say we fired these two officers for these actions? I mean, where is it? What about the police officer that was sentenced in federal court in Greenbelt to what was it, 5 years or whatever? You know, in relations to the smuggling of illegal cigarettes from Virginia. Nobody wants to talk about that. You know, but a lot of that is arrogance and incompetence, in my opinion. And you throw in a lot of actually malfeasance, you know. But look at the police in general, though. Look at the police in general. You almost never hear about police officers being held accountable for their actions or indicted, more or less, you know, criminally, like indicted. Because me as a citizen, if I go up to somebody, I grab them, I take their phone away, I knock it out of their hand, I destroy the recordings on the phone, the citizen is going to call the police is going to come arrest me and take me to jail. But the premise is, if they do it under the banner of color of law, then they are, quote unquote, more or less infallible. So where does this concept of being infallible come from? We have to look back to 1215 with the Magna Carta. I'm not trying to go off track, but I have to give a little bit of history to give context. 1215, the Magna Carta. The citizens of England were going up against the King of England, King John. That's his name. I believe John's the correct king. Forgive me if I make small mistakes. But King John, 1215, they said, sir, we need more rights. We need to have these privileges. We need rights. And thus comes the Magna Carta, rule of law. You just can't arbitrarily lock people away in the dungeons and all this other stuff. The king was no longer infallible. Then look at another example of being infallible. Look at the Pope. In 1869, 1870, they had the First Vatican Conference. Basically, the Pope is... here's the nuts and bolts. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of history with the Catholic Church. I've done a lot of reading about the Catholic Church and, English law and all this stuff. But the nuts and bolts of it is the Pope is infallible. He can't make no mistakes when it comes to interpreting the Catholic religion, when he makes these decrees, all this stuff. The Pope's infallible. He's the anointed one. Can't make no mistakes. And then if you go further along in history, people that administer these decrees or the law whatsoever in history, whether you look at English law or whether you look at the Pope, they too are infallible. So, for example, in Old English law, when the judges, when they would administer the law, they were infallible because they were, quote unquote, the king's hand. I don't know if anybody watches the show. What's the show I'm thinking of? It's on HBO. It'll come to my mind in a second. Game of Thrones, where they have the person that wears the little medal on their shoulder, and they become the king's hand. And they are just like the king. They are infallible also. Well, you get that same type of concept with the judges, with state delegates, state senators, state judges, the governor. All these people have immunity. And what does immunity translate into in today's times? Being infallible. Well, not only are the high-ranking government officials infallible, but also the low-ranking government officials. They're infallible. The police are infallible too now, because you get judicial immunity, legislative immunity, executive immunity. All these different types of immunity translate into being infallible. You don't believe me? Go read it for yourself. When is the last time you heard of a judge being thrown off the bench for sentencing an innocent person to prison? You don't hear about it. Matter of fact, prosecutors have what's called absolute immunity. Go read it for yourself. But that's the mindset that permeates government. And they say we need these immunities to do the job the right way it needs to be done. Well, I would argue, look at the corruption that's all around us. There's an old saying that when the system fails, we all suffer. But I would say, well, the system is just sputtering along, and I would, just by my humble observation, a lot of people are suffering. A lot of people are suffering. But those are just my humble thoughts. I always try to bring facts, to the table. I bring information that, more or less can't be disputed. It can't be disputed that the police had scandals going on in the academy. Can't be disputed that these officers are getting sent to prison. Can't be disputed that the county spends millions of dollars on settlements. They don't want to release the records, though. Well, I'm more than happy to update my followers on YouTube and my fellow citizens. I strongly encourage you to keep reading the Constitution. I strongly encourage you to keep standing up for your rights. And I strongly encourage you to, don't give an inch, because a lot of these people in government, they're low down and they'll abuse you at every juncture. So always be willing to protect yourself. All right, with that, I wish you well, and thank you for watching.